Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And with me tonight, the Conservative MP, former Attorney General, who voted Remain, Dominic Grieve. From Labour's backbenches, one of the few Labour MPs who campaigned and voted for Brexit, John Mann. Leanne Wood, the leader of Plaid Cymru and a Welsh Assembly member for the past 13 years. Journalist Isabel Oakeshott, author of a biography of David Cameron, and with Aaron Banks, co-author of a book about the Brexit campaign. And until this morning, the presenter of The Right Stuff on Channel 5. He left that programme today and instead of being down the pub has come to join us in Carnarvon. Matthew Wright. Thanks very much. And remember, you can, as always, get involved in this argument on social media using our hashtag, which is BBCQT. And our first question is from Carl Mather, please.
Who should take the final decision on the Brexit deal? The Cabinet, Parliament, or the electorate?
Goes to the heart of the argument that goes on and on and on. John Mann, who should take the final decision?
Who will? Parliament will. It's what the law says. Parliament will vote on the deal one way or other. Parliament, in my view, has a very strong mandate in terms of what that is. And I think that the deal will be agreed, and I think the deal will be voted through, and I think that'll be a good thing.
OK. Dominic Grieve?
Probably Parliament. It certainly is Parliament's job to approve this deal. The difficulty comes that if there is a deal, then Parliament likes it, then that's what's going to happen, and we will leave on that deal. The difficulty and the anxiety is that if we end up with a deal that is rejected by Parliament because it doesn't think it's good enough, there's been a suggestion that in those circumstances it's a binary choice and you have to leave with no deal. That must be wrong. And Parliament in those circumstances will have to take action to try to remedy it without causing too great a political crisis. It'll certainly be quite a big political crisis. What we've been debating the last few days is, can we put in place, in anticipation in case this happens, some sensible structures so that this crisis can best be managed? And unfortunately, it's proved rather difficult. So I spent my last 48 hours sort of negotiating to try to see if we can do that.
Who with?
With government ministers.
With the Prime Minister?
Well, not directly with the Prime Minister. I've seen her from time to time, but we indicated to her on Monday that we thought it was absolutely essential there should be three things. Firstly, if a deal was rejected by Parliament, there should be an opportunity for a motion to be brought before Parliament, which enables Parliament to say what it thinks should happen. Seems sensible. We got that, and it's gone into the amendment that's just been tabled in the House of Lords. The second one was that if it's clear that the negotiations collapse and the Prime Minister agrees, there's another motion by Parliament where Parliament can express a view about what should happen. But rather extraordinarily, and at the last minute this afternoon, when I'd been doing my negotiating, and I'd actually got on the train, I thought it was all over. If we get to the really apocalyptic moment, which is end of January or early February, it doesn't really matter which it is in exact date, and we really don't have a deal, then the government was only prepared to offer Parliament an opportunity to note the position, not to vote to give a view to the government about what should happen. And I simply don't understand why this has been done. And there is a sort of background fear in two directions. One background fear is that actually there are some people who would quite like to just tip the UK out of the EU with no deal at all, which, in my view, would be economically catastrophic for every man, woman and child in this country. The other one is that people are trying to stop Brexit happening. Seeing that we triggered Article 50 and that we leave automatically on the 29th of March, it can hardly be said that in wanting to put into place some mechanisms by which Parliament can review the government's actions if things go wrong, you're going to stop Brexit, because without anything, we will leave.
OK. Dominic, I'm going to stop you because you've set out your stall and you've been in the van of this whole argument. Isabel Oakeshott, what do you make of what he said?
I hope everyone managed to keep up with that. I think people are utterly confused by what's going on. You know, MPs, I look at MPs on all sides of this argument, and they are like a bunch of drunks on a pub crawl, staggering from one pub to the next, not quite knowing where they're going next, not knowing what the end destination is, not knowing how much it's going to cost, and not knowing quite how bad the hangover's going to be. And the problem, Dominic, is that people don't trust you, and it doesn't help. You say that we're definitely going to leave, but it doesn't help when you're cavorting around with stop Brexiteers, as you were caught doing yesterday. That does not. Well, he was photographed doing that, hanging out with people whose absolute agenda is to stop Brexit.
Hold on a moment.
So I just think, Dominic, you've had a long say. So I just think that if MPs are confused about what to do here, it's really simple. And you should go back to your own manifesto, where you stood on a manifesto for election which said we would leave the EU and we would leave the single market and we'd leave the customs union. And you stood on that platform.
It's got nothing to do with what we've just been debating in Parliament.
OK. I'll come back to you. Matthew Wright.
Within this conversation already, the frustrations that I have with Brexit emerge, the stifling of debate, which seems to come from those that want to leave in the more rabid direction. To address the question of the different options, I too think Parliament should have a say. When Nigel Farage was open to the idea of a second referendum on my show, I thought, brilliant, oh, this is maybe a moment. And actually you think it through and you can't have a second referendum for the British public, because then you'd have to have a third, and the British people have spoken. Parliament needs to ratify and ensure we get the best possible deal, and if you trust the government, and you look at how the government has behaved so far with Brexit and absolute chaos and disarray, the notion that they can decide for all of this without challenge, it just is bizarre to me, quite bizarre.
Leanne Wood.
Well, the Tories don't have a mandate for this. If you remember, Theresa May went before the people a year ago now and asked to be a strong and stable leader, I think were her words, and people decided not to give her that majority that she was asking for. So she doesn't have a mandate for an extreme Brexit or a no-deal Brexit either, I would argue. We've had 2 years since the vote to leave the European Union, and you can't get agreement on one position in the governing party at a UK level, and the same is the case for the opposition as well. It's an absolute disaster. And if we do end up without any deal at all, or if we do end up with the extreme Brexit that some of the bad boys of Brexit wanted to see, then in terms of the Welsh economy, that would be an absolute disaster. It's been estimated that we could lose £5 billion from the Welsh economy if we got through a hard Brexit. So at the very least, our National Assembly should have a say on the final terms of the final deal. And that is something that the First Minister of Wales was supportive of initially, but is no longer supportive of, which is a shame. But I also think there's an argument for people to have a vote on the final deal. I'm not arguing for a second referendum. I'm not arguing for a rerun. I'm a Democrat and I accept the vote even though I campaigned to remain. I think that people should be asked to endorse or not the final deal, whatever it is agreed.
Is that not a referendum?
It should be done in the form of a referendum.
You are in favour of a second referendum?
Not a rerun of the first referendum, an endorsement of the terms of the final deal. That's different.
Can I throw something in here? What I really don't... I will come to members of the audience in a minute. I really don't understand this issue. You have a Prime Minister and you have a Cabinet and a government, and they're negotiating. And as the great expert Vernon Bogdanor says, Parliament can obviously kick them all out, or it accepts what they've done. Why do you want to say, oh, we want you to do this and then a bit of that, and if you come back with this... that's why people are lost. There's such complexity. We don't know, if this comes back, then we need a vote. If that comes back, we want to tell you what to do. Your job as MPs, you can just vote her out if you want to.
Yes, but if we bring down a government, that's going to create another crisis. And to do that in the middle of leaving the EU is not a very good idea. And this is, if I may say, this ties in a bit with... Isabel started going on about who you meet with. Well, I did go and meet with people who are, in fact, the People's Vote campaign.
Sorry, this is a mystery to most people. Just explain what it is you did wrong.
Well, look, read your Daily Mail today and you will discover that because my mother was half French, notwithstanding working in the WRVS during the Second World War, being a British civil servant, I am a suspect spy from France who is colluding with vicious people who meet in secret places to block Brexit.
Are you denying this?
I'm certainly... I think my mother would be a bit surprised about her loyalty, and I think I'm a bit surprised about my loyalty being called into question. But the fact is, it's a level of debate which makes rational discussion impossible, and it's deliberately designed to do it. When Mr Dacre in the Daily Mail decides to raise the temperature and lead to you being bombarded with hate mail, he does it for the deliberate intention of trying to prevent people engaging in rational debate. We need rational debate. We need to listen to each other.
Let's come back to the issue, John Mann, of all the shenanigans that's going on in the House of Commons at the moment. What do you make of it? Do you think that... what do you think Dominic's motive is, and is he right to be arguing for what he's arguing?
Well, I know the consequence of what he's trying to get through is that someone could take this to the Supreme Court, and we could end up... Well, I hope that's not your...
No, it's not.
aim, because
none of the amendments are designed to do that, I promise you. Last thing we want.
Because if you and I could agree that it should be Parliament rather than any risk of it being the Supreme Court...
I promise you. Not the
I, as a Leaver, and you, as you were previously probably still are a Remainer at heart, but accepting the referendum, could agree, as we did on the 13th of December last year, when I supported your resolution that got through by a handful of votes that gave Parliament a vote. And why did I want to give Parliament a vote? Because when I voted to leave, it was for sovereignty back in this country. And it seemed to me, I'm elected as an MP, I have my mandate, I know I'm going to be voting.
You say
I think
this
people would be...
in Wales now.
To me, I love it all as one big country.
Oh,
I want to see it's a negotiation. In a negotiation, there's a vast amount of theatre goes on. You've seen the theatre. The media's part of the theatre. MPs are part of the theatre. That's what happens in any negotiation. To get a good conclusion to a negotiation, you need to negotiate hard. You need to know what you're after. What I want to see, and what I think will come out, is us able to trade without any barriers of any kind for us, any barriers for the Irish or the French, with their goods, with their services, no extra costs, no tariffs, and with us controlling our borders, in other words, with immigration controls as well. If we get that out of the deal, I would be delighted, and that would be a good result.
So would I, but
it's not possible.
I would be delighted with that result, but we also have to bear in mind that actually what John's asking for may be very difficult to get.
Well, you're making it more difficult. You're making it more difficult by undermining the government's
No, that's the
negotiations.
traitor argument. You can't express a divergent view, because if you do, it will prevent us. This is so pernicious. We are a democracy. If people can't go out and express their views and have a rational debate, we will come out with bad outcomes.
OK,
John's already misunderstood.
Leave the Daily Mail and all that.
I'm not talking about the Daily Mail. I'm very happy to.
No, don't want to go into that. I mean, you can do that, done that already. But just about your calling the Prime Minister's compromise, as it was put, unacceptable. What is it about what the Prime Minister's doing? And then there are a lot of people in the audience who want to speak about it. What is it you object to about what the Prime Minister is doing?
95% of what happened was wonderful, and I'm really grateful to the ministers I negotiated with. But for some reason, at the end, the thing we were most asking for was, if we come to a point where we are in danger, within a few weeks of dropping out, Parliament must be allowed to express a view, not to force the government to do something, but to express a view about what should happen.
But you can always express a view. You're Parliament, you're sovereign.
No, there are different... But actually...
Sorry,
we
can they not?
We will.
Well, put a motion down and have a vote.
But if you have a structure there now, it will save dispute when we get there, and that's why we wanted to do it. And it's, if that case, if I'm wrong about that, then it's innocuous and John should feel able to support it. It's certainly not designed, John, to lead to challenges in court, I can promise you.
Do you think the Prime Minister was tricking you then? Do you think she was leading you on in the hope you wouldn't notice?
No, I don't think the Prime Minister was tricking us, but I'm afraid that when it came to the end, she wasn't, for some reason, in a position to deliver to us what we had understood.
Well, she has, in her statement to Lancaster House, her vision of Brexit. Institute of Government has reviewed everything she said she was going to deliver, and under any of all the available models that are out there, none of them can deliver what she's promised. So what at the heart of this is everyone's talking about something that's going to be delivered, whatever kind of customs arrangements, but no one can actually guarantee all the things.
But we're in the middle of the. But it's relevant. But we're in the middle of the negotiation. If you're the Irish government, then you're at risk. If there's a no deal, that's a loss to us. If there's tariff barriers and costs and huge queues at the ports, coming in and out of Wales and everywhere else on the borders. That's huge. But it also is for Ireland, and they're part of the European Union, which is why there's an imperative in the European Union on trade to get a deal with us. There's not just one loser if the negotiation breaks down, there's two losers. And that's why allowing that negotiation to happen is so vital, and not distracting in with the sideshow, and it is a sideshow, of the theatricals of Parliament.
OK, I'm now going to hear from our audience, because they've been patiently listening to a very good debate here. I don't know what you made of it. I go to the man in spectacles in the fourth row there first. There are two of you in spectacles, the man to the... yeah, you. Yeah.
You've just spent 2 days horse trading in the House of Commons over amendments that were placed by that other meaningful assembly, the House of Lords, and spent an awful lot of time bringing those amendments down. Another bill will have to go to the Lords, and the whole thing will start all over again in a few weeks' time. So this is just prolonging the process, prolonging the agony, and we are still waiting to find out which way is this going to turn out, because from the politicians, i.e. the House of Commons, we still really don't know.
And what do you make of it? Why do you think it's happening?
I think it's because of the constitutional system that we have, where we've got a second house, which hopefully is there to filter, ratify, and make sure we don't turn into a dictatorship. But it looks to some people, me included, that system in the Lords is being over-politicised and used to turn their opinion away from what the people voted for in the referendum.
You said the back there, man very back there. Let's just hear from some more members of the audience. Yes, you.
I'm very worried about the idea of a new referendum, because I think it will have many of the same problems as the first. For example, Scotland has a massively different outcome to the rest of, the UK. But at the end of the day, England has 85% of the UK population, so whatever decision is made, it's going to be made by them and only them. Like, the votes of Wales doesn't even matter at the end of the day. So that brings back to what Leanne said earlier, like, the National Assembly should definitely have a say, but also, like, I really get frustrated when Leave politicians, such as the one on the panel there, talks about sovereignty and taking back control. But what we've just witnessed this week is the Labour Party capitulating, giving up, surrendering, giving all the powers that was meant to go to Wales back to Westminster.
OK, we may come to that point later on. Then you, sir, there. Yes.
It's just to go back to something Leanne said earlier on. She said that the Conservatives lost their majority at the election, which is correct. But correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that all Labour MPs also stood on a manifesto to leave the European Union. So that would give a supermajority in Parliament if I'm wrong.
OK.
You're not wrong.
Not wrong, he says. No women with their hands up at the moment. I'm sure they might be. All right, Isabella, shall I come to you?
OK.
Yeah, go on.
Thank you. Well, I'm just still a little bit confused by Dominic's position. I noted that about a year ago, Dominic, you said, and you were talking in the House of Commons, no one in this House, as far as I'm aware, wishes to fetter the government's hands in negotiations, or indeed the government's right to walk away from the negotiations. Now, what you are doing now is doing exactly that. You are attempting to make it very difficult for them to walk away. And it is essential, if we're going to get a good deal, for Theresa May to be able to say, actually, you know what, this isn't good enough. take your deal and we are just going to leave it and we will do our own thing?
A brief answer, Dominic, if you would. Then again for the woman there.
A year ago, we had nearly 2 years to negotiate, and indeed, I've never interfered with the government's negotiations.
But you're undermining it.
No, Isabel, let him
me
answer.
finish. I haven't interfered with them. The government's got on with it. I mean, I simply ask, does it look as if this negotiation is proving easy? Does it look as if it's going to come to a readily satisfactory conclusion? What contingency do we put in place if it collapses?
All right.
Because the consequences of its collapse will be very serious. That's what we're considering. I wish the government well in its negotiation. And I take Isabel's point. I can see you can have a tipping point between worrying about that and interfering in the current negotiation. But I happen to think that what we were trying to do this week will not have that adverse impact at all.
All right, the woman there in the middle. Yes.
Do you know what? What we've seen this week from the government is frankly embarrassing. We must be the laughingstock of Europe. Backroom deals going on right up to the moment of the debate. There's whispering on the back benches in the House of Commons. This is a government that's imploding. Theresa May stood on a manifesto that Brexit was in the safest possible place in her hands. It's been an absolute mess from start to finish. And quite frankly, I don't know how tenable this government's position is for much longer.
Who do you blame for that?
I think the splits in the Tory party are just too big to come together and make a meaningful deal. They're all fighting against each other. It's a nest of vipers. They're just not getting anywhere with it at all. It's just not happening in a way that looks like it's going to be successful for our country. And we're the ones who are going to pay the price economically. We're the ones who are going to end up with less jobs coming to us and less money in our pockets. And it's not good enough that we're left to watch these people make such a hash of it.
And if they all disagree with each other, how would you resolve it?
I just think they're the wrong people for the job, really. I just think that they just cannot agree amongst themselves. It's about time they stood aside and let somebody do it who actually will.
But the trouble is, Labour is as divided as the Tories, aren't they? This week we've seen the same divisions on the European Economic Area. Totally divided. Totally divided.
The woman here. Yes.
I'd just like to say that I agree with Dominic. I think that if the government had been good at the negotiation and not led everybody down this path that people didn't trust them, then there would not have been the need to have the checks and balances. The Lords have put up some very good points that needed to be looked at. We have a democratic society, and what I don't like is people being shouted down for those discussions. If we get to the end of the negotiations and we are at a point when we have a hard Brexit and we are at a cliff edge, and we have economic failure in Britain, etc. We all care about this country. We want things to work, whether you are Remain or Leave at the beginning of this. I was Remain. I would love this to get moving forward now, and it's been shambolic, and I just want things to end. But I don't like the debates being stopped, because we are a society that is democratic, and it's really important to hear people's views.
Okay. So, in the middle there, yes, you.
I agree with Leanne to some extent, because if you go to the Earth, you'll see EU funding. If you go to schools, you'll see EU funding. If you go to a lot of things in Wales, you will see EU funding. And I've seen no attempt by the Conservatives that are in power to say, oh, don't worry, Wales, you will not lose your £5 billion, we will try and help you. But we've not seen that. We're just going to see that we're already knowing that local services are getting cut because there's no money, so EU funding is helping them. So if there is no EU funding and the money's just going to stay the same, then services are just going to get worse for the people. So in terms of national interest for Wales, I really think that there needs to be more of a voice in Parliament for Wales.
So why did Wales vote to leave?
Well, you know, yeah, they did vote to leave, but to be fair, it was... Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Around here. And on the east of Wales, to be fair, there is more... I live on the east side. There is more and more people that are from England that have my accent, but if you come round here, where people voted to remain, then it's going to be the same.
But you can't keep dividing and dividing it down, can you? The gentleman that said
democracy.
that the Welsh vote didn't count. Actually, if you took the Welsh vote out, we'd have probably remained. So, and then we wouldn't have had these problems. All the votes counted.
I'll go to the two people sitting side by side, the man in the pink tie and the man in the white beard, if you can be in a white beard. But you, sir, first. Yes, you start.
Having been around the first referendum and voting on it, it's like an echo chamber. I'm listening to everything that took place then. Then we were told at the common market, oh yes, our trade will be superb, we're going to get on with it, we can sell our products, and we've got Europe to go at. Now, after being asset stripped, this country, which was the biggest manufacturing industry in the world, railways, shipping, airplanes, you name it, we built it. Electric engines that were on the Panama Canal in the 1800s and were still there 100 years later. And they couldn't put one back that they buy in Japan.
OK.
English electric and the likes of that were lost.
And you, sir, next to him.
The gentleman behind me said people didn't vote round here to leave. Well, Anglesey, the next constituency over, did indeed vote to leave. And Leanne earlier, with her sort of slightly confused argument, was saying that there was somehow she was conflating the vote to leave and Brexit with the government's mandate. Well, the vote for the government came afterwards. The mandate was given at the Brexit referendum for us to leave. Whether or not the Conservatives made a hash of the election is neither here nor there. Parliament has to get on with the job, has to deliver Brexit. And so when we're arguing about funding and so on, well, ultimately it's our money. For every £2 we give them, we get £1 back. So if we move forwards and make a good go of Brexit, if we stop the infighting, as everybody in this panel I hope would agree, and get behind the government, stop trying to tear them to shreds and piffling over whether this constituency voted to leave, and make a good deal of it, then perhaps we can move forwards and we've so far spent over half of the programme arguing about it.
OK. Dominic Grieve, you said the compromise that Theresa May offered was unacceptable in what you heard today. What are you going to do now?
Well, I think the group of us will talk further to the government and try to resolve it. I mean, after all, that's what we did on Monday night. We didn't force a vote. We wanted to resolve it by discussion. And I'm sorry that we didn't resolve it by discussion, what I thought was a sensible way, which today. So we're going to have to go back and do it and have another go.
Well, and fail once more.
Well, we might fail once more, or
and then what do you do?
Well, hang on. I might be persuaded by the arguments that the government puts to me, because I will listen to what the government says. I mean, quite apart from anything else, it's a bit difficult to know why at the last minute they changed their mind. So of course I'll listen to that. I'll go back tomorrow and doubtless I will find out more. And also, I hope they listen to me when I say I don't understand why you've done this last minute switch, which, as a lawyer, and it's a legal document, I can't understand what's got into you, because I genuinely can't. I don't understand this final twitch at the end of this negotiation. And I hope they then listen to me, and I hope they also listen to my colleagues. Bear in mind, I'm not on my own. I have my view, but, ultimately, if there's a vote in Parliament, my view isn't going to prevail unless a majority of the House of Commons, including a substantial number of my own Conservative colleagues, think that the point we've been arguing is worth continuing to argue. And can I just say one last thing? We shouldn't argue for the sake of arguing. And perhaps it's another thing for the, Isabel, on your bit about the press. If every time you say, actually, I think we've got a sensible compromise here, the press immediately say, they backed down, you're never going to get people compromising, because instead of saying, actually, we've both won out of this process, we've learnt something from the discussion we've had, it's binary, they've won, they've lost. And that's all the press, very often, is interested in.
Damien,
and all that, Dominic, all that raises the all that creates problems. So all I'm saying, my plea, because it's been a long week, so forgive me, but my plea is...
Been a long answer, too.
We need to, it is, but we need to listen to what other people are saying. And the compromises are probably going to be important in getting the best possible outcome.
Really brief point from me. I mean, you sound so clever, and you are really clever. And I think one of the problems that people have is that they feel that the politicians think they're cleverer than us, and that the politicians think they have better answers, and it's all getting so convoluted. All you need to do is return to the basic result of the referendum and carry it out.
But
all right, wait a minute. You sir, in respect to this. Yes.
Thank you. Are we here? Oh, yes. I never thought I'd find myself saying this, but I trust. Trust was mentioned earlier. I trust a legally trained Conservative politician a damn sight more than I trust a tabloid hack.
There aren't any tabloid hacks on this table, or are you suggesting there are?
Pardon?
There aren't tabloid hacks.
Previous.
Broadsheet.
I'm not. I didn't think it was a reference to his.
No, it wasn't a reference to him. Okay, I'll take a couple more points and then we'll move on. The woman there on the left, there in blue. Yes, you.
Thank you. I am really fed up of all the arguing. Nothing is getting really sorted out. We are a democracy. The House of Lords is not elected. Our MPs are, and they're there and always have been to carry out the will of the people. For me, all this in-bickering has been said is going on too long, and I cannot see why they just don't get their act together, get rid of the negativity that I have picked up here. They should really not talk about failure of these talks that they're having. It's about having a positive outlook going into it. Churchill would not have put up with all this, and I am beginning to think, and no matter people may laugh, but Donald Trump was able to go and get an agreement without the will of his parliament, so to speak. And I'm beginning to think that possibly someone like that is needed here to take charge and sort it out.
Good. We might come to Trump if we have any time left. As you rightly pointed out, we've spent half the programme so far talking about this. But let's just take this one further question, perhaps not at too great length, from Lois Roberts, please. Lois.
15 minutes to discuss post-Brexit devolution insults our Celtic nations. Are you surprised that the SNP walked out?
SNP walked out. Yes, SNP walked out of or kicked out of the House of Commons yesterday because they objected to the moves that would have Westminster take powers they thought should remain in the Scottish Parliament, and it wasn't properly debated. Leanne Wood, were you in sympathy with the SNP walkout?
Yes, I was, and I stand in solidarity with that move. Powers have been grabbed from our national institutions in Scotland and Wales. Brexit is being used as an opportunity to take powers back. We talk all the time about recognising the will of the people and honouring this Brexit referendum. Well, there are other referendums that need to be honoured as well. One took place in 1997, which established the National Assembly for Wales and the Scottish Parliament, and another one took place in 2011, which established the National Assembly as a lawmaking parliament. Those referendums both increased and progressed the powers of our National Assembly, and that is the will of the Welsh people, to continue with devolution and not to roll it back.
Isn't the idea that some of these powers that, as you say, have been taken back will be returned after a fixed period of time? They're just for the process of negotiation, or do you not believe that?
Well, that's what they say, but I don't trust the Tories on this at all. I'm very, very disappointed, actually, in the Labour government in Wales, because they signed up to an agreement with the Tories that has enabled this power grab. And just as they failed to properly oppose Theresa May in Westminster, they failed to oppose this move, and it was Plaid Cymru who stood firm on this, and the SNP are obviously doing the work that they're doing in the Westminster Parliament as well. But this is a really serious issue. We should not be in a situation where we have to defend our National Assembly against a power grab from Westminster. It's outrageous, and we should all be very, very angry about it.
John Mann.
There won't be a majority in Parliament to ever have a power grab, as Parliament's currently constituted. So I don't think that will happen.
It's happened.
Well, no, there's no power grab.
Well,
there's a perception there could be. And I think, I understand. I understand. I talked to the SNP just before they were doing their walkout stunt, and I understand why they did it, because it's part of the theatre, and they're arguing the case, and they're going to need to fight, and you're going to need to fight hard to make sure that the Tory government doesn't do that, because you're right, it could happen. Yes, it could. The Labour position is that it shouldn't happen. There'll be no Labour MPs who will be voting for that to happen. If there's a Labour government, that won't be happening. If there's a Labour government, there will be more devolution of powers. If it was left to me, we'd be going further than we've said before, both in relation to more powers to Scotland and more powers, and significally more powers to Wales, and indeed to the English regions as well.
All right.
You know, because devolving power is one of the reasons that some of us were keen not to see an increasingly centralised European state as was beginning to emerge. We want powers removed to the local level. And that's part of the motivation for many people.
No, but as a Isabel Oakeshott, no, come on, we must keep moving. Isabel Oakeshott,
well, I'll be very brief. I mean, I'm never in sympathy with the SNP. I want this country to stay together. And I'm not impressed by amateur dramatics in the House of Commons. I think the SNP is just sore because they realise that enthusiasm for independence is dying.
OK. Matthew Wright.
I'm quite sympathetic to Leanne's view of not trusting the Tories on this, and I think there's evidence today that you've seen from the Scottish Secretary, David Mundell, telling Scotland very bluntly, you're not a part of the UK, you're not a partner of the UK, you're part of the UK. And I think that is a very provocative and incendiary thing for someone in his position to say, and that does suggest to me that the Tories may have an agenda with regards to the SNP.
And Dominic Grieve, can you be brief on this one? Because we're halfway, more than halfway through.
I'll be very brief. The SNP had a point. The programming was inadequate and didn't provide enough time to debate issues that were of importance to them, although I did think it was histrionics and they shouldn't have done it that way. There were other ways in which they could have registered their protest.
We wouldn't be talking about it now, would we, then?
Well, yeah, but ultimately it goes down very badly in Parliament. That's all I can say to you. And they didn't earn brownie points for doing it.
Scotland must have
as for the power grab, the repatriation of powers from Brussels, which were previously exercised in Brussels, is a real and genuine problem to which there isn't an easy solution. And the government has actually worked really hard to try to put together something which respects the fact that nominally some of these powers were previously devolved, were devolved in Wales and Scotland. And I approve of the way the government's approached it. It's done its very best in what's actually a difficult circumstance.
Right. You up there on the right, and then I'll come to you at the very back there, yes.
These powers, you say, claim they haven't been grabbed. These are powers over areas such as agriculture, such as the environment. These are areas which are entirely devolved to Wales and Scotland at the moment, and Westminster has no say whatsoever in them. So in taking these powers to Westminster, they are being taken away from us. And you say it's only temporarily, but it's for 7 years, which is a very long time in politics. I used to say 7 days, but 7 years now. And the government, whether it's Tory or Labour, can make all sorts of regulations on the environment, on our farmers, and I feel that there's very unlikely, after 7 years, that they're going to sit back and say, well, we'll give these back and leave it to the Assembly.
Do you think it's a deliberate attempt to undermine devolution? Is that what you're saying?
I'm afraid...
Not the complexity of the EU-Westminster arrangement?
Yes, I'm afraid I do. I think that the Conservative Party in particular is trying to row back on devolution. They've seen with the independence referendum in Scotland how close Scotland came to becoming independent, and they're trying to grab powers back now and reverse devolution.
A lot of people my age don't even know that this power grab and this shift in power is happening, and it's quite a serious thing because it's undemocratic. Do you think that if broadcasting was devolved to Wales and people would have more news and more information about what's going on in Wales, that people could engage in the debates better.
You think there's a... You think there's a shortage of news about Wales in Wales?
Yeah, since I think 35 years, there's just one Welsh language channel, there's one radio channel in Welsh, and it's other countries like Basque Country and Catalonia have several news in English. It's just like half an hour at the end about Wales. There's not a full discussion. Everything seems to be about Britain. Even tonight, only Leanne lives in Wales on this panel. So.
Can I answer that point? Can I answer that point? Because it's a really important point. There's a huge information deficit about Welsh politics, to the extent that ahead of the last National Assembly elections in 2016, a third of the people voting believed that the health service was still being run by the Tories in Westminster, and half of people voting believed that education was being run by the Tories in Westminster, when that isn't the case. Those decisions are being made by a Labour government in Cardiff Bay, and if people don't understand who are making those decisions, how can they make a fully informed choice when they go to the vote?
Okay. I'm forced to move on because time is passing. We're going to be in Birmingham next Thursday, by the way, and the week after that in Exeter. And on the screen there are the details of how to apply, which I'll give at the end. But let's go on to another question. This from David Ratcliffe, please. David Ratcliffe.
Is Donald Trump's unconventional style of foreign diplomacy making the world safer?
Well, we've all watched the diplomacy that's been going on with North Korea. Is it making the world safer? Matthew Wright.
I don't think people are necessarily going to like this, but I am a cynic by nature, and having seen this country catch a cold, having been told weapons of mass destruction in a certain country are pointing our way and ready to go in 45 minutes, you'll have to excuse me for being slightly dubious of claims that a tin pot dictator who's keeping his people in virtual slavery has developed nuclear weapons. I'm not saying he hasn't got intercontinental ballistic missiles, they've been seen, but whether he's got the capability to fire a nuclear bomb, I'm not convinced he has. I think what Donald Trump has done is a very risky strategy, that he has legitimised a major dictator. He has glad-handed him. He has introduced him to the world stage. He is essentially, as far as I can see, slapping a guy on the back who keeps his own people repressed. And if that's a blow for freedom, no, don't buy it. Don't buy it.
Isabella.
Well, it feels safer this week, but who knows about next week? That's the problem. I mean, neither of these two characters, neither the American president nor Kim Jong-un, are exactly known for their steadiness and consistency. I would say, though, it's not fashionable to praise Donald Trump at all, but surely it's got to be better that he has got this face-to-face meeting. There is now a connection. It's opened a channel for communication. Maybe it'll all go wrong. Maybe, just maybe, it might result in some improvement. So I think we have to give him some credit for this, however grudgingly.
Leanne Wood, what do you think about unconventional diplomacy and that?
Well, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump at all. Not at all, not one little bit. I really hope that something comes of this, because the people living in the regime in North Korea live under appalling circumstances, and they deserve to have some kind of a break. But, you know, let's be realistic. There have been numbers of statements over the years that there are going to be moves towards denuclearisation and all the rest of it. I want to see something actually happen before I start applauding this.
Dominic Grieve.
Unconventional diplomacy may occasionally work, particularly if it's done by somebody who otherwise behaves conventionally and suddenly sees an opportunity and goes and takes it. But I have to say the trouble with Donald Trump is that he's unconventional all the time. You don't know what's going to happen in any 24-hour news cycle, and you don't know what time the 4 a.m. tweet comes out and suddenly American policy changes. Yeah. It's not surprising that people feel a bit jittery about this. I mean, I wish him well in his overture to North Korea. If it works, then it will show that actually his unconventional diplomacy has, on this occasion, been correct. But I have to say, it's a roller coaster ride, and from the point of view of trying to keep international stability, he's an absolute nightmare. Let's face it, you just don't know what's going to happen. Look at the G7 conference. I mean, suddenly he says the international rules-based system, which is the system of obeying international rules, which underpins all Western democratic principles, he refuses to sign up to it. I mean, what does that say? I mean, we know also the fact he suddenly imposes tariffs when probably everybody around this table thinks tariffs are a really bad idea economically. Suddenly, boom. And apparently that's the person with whom we're going to do a trade deal. But anyway, I won't go into that. It is a very difficult, and on the whole, if you're going to be unconventional, you ought to do it when people know that actually you can be relied on in other matters.
All right. The woman in the third row there.
I think for diplomacy to work, you have to understand the system that you're working with. In my opinion, Donald Trump's kind of goal with North Korea was to build himself a condo on the beach. I don't think he actually understood anything about the political system he was working with, and his strategy is to get the people to build for him there.
And he did say lovely beaches, didn't he?
The press conference afterwards
beaches,
was a quite bizarre show of narcissism, in my opinion.
All right, and the woman here in the very front row.
I think to mention Donald Trump and the word safety in the same sentence is ridiculous. To me, he represents everything that's unsafe. I think he's very dangerous in his views, the way he can rally people behind him. And I think, actually, I don't trust this manoeuvre just as much as I don't trust what tweet's going to come out next. Yeah.
John Mann.
His attitude on women is dangerous because people will copy it, and that has huge impact and lasting impact, and that is horrendous and big. His pulling out of the climate change agreement is, for the future of the world, is of huge consequences, and is, again, this is major league stuff. So Trump, a nightmare. However, Kim Jong-un and Trump, they're very similar. I can see... I once met his father, Kim's father, only in passing, and he was like him, and strange family, strange people.
How did you meet him?
Well, it was at a conference, and you know, no one was talking to me, and no one was talking to him, so I went and had a word with him. It's a bit like being in Parliament sometimes. but and he was there with his aides, and a very strange... This was before he was leader. When he was the heir apparent, which he was for half his life. And very strange person. But what I think is that he'll go to America. He'll probably ask to go to Disneyland. He'll go on the latest ride. He'll go to Coney Island, and he'll actually do what most people in the former Soviet Union wanted to do when communism broke down there. And I think we should be wary of underestimating the significance of the fact that this North Korean leader has been meeting. And it's not just Trump. Jonathan Powell, who did the spade work in the Northern Ireland Agreement, has been backwards and forwards to North Korea over the last year. The South Koreans have met on a leadership level with them. This is obviously very major for everyone in South Korea as well. I think we're seeing a realisation in North Korea that they can go no further. The Chinese have been pressing them economically, particularly on coal. They can't survive at the moment, literally. Therefore, I think they've realised this is in their self-interest, and therefore he's kind of modelling himself in this incredibly quirky way on Trump. One final thing, Dave, just to keep having to disagree a little bit with Dominic on big issues, but there is someone on this panel who thinks that protecting industry is a good thing. When Trump's protected his steel industry and his car producing industry, the unions in America today who are hostile to Trump, the Steelworkers Union, the Automotive Workers Union, their equivalent of the TUC, are massively behind what Donald Trump is doing. And I wanted to do that with the remnants of our coal industry.
Are we drifting away from the question?
No, we're not, because this is about the character of Donald Trump, and we must be careful. He's unconventional. I think that a lot of his approach is dangerous and horrific, but we should understand the bits that he's doing that are popular and why. And if he achieves this, and actually gets real disarmament going in North Korea, that is a very big victory for the world, and we should congratulate him if that happens.
OK, you sit up there. You are confused on the table.
I welcome the diplomatic relations between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump needs to be brave now and confronting him with gross human rights violations. And he needs to be brave and talk about it rather than, you know... Yeah.
All right, and you sit up there?
First of all, 2 points. One is, why is Twitter allowed for governmental persons globally? Yeah, why? It's so rapid fire. It dumbfounds me, it really does. It's stupid stuff. Social technologies, too rapid fire, stupid stuff.
All right, so you shouldn't have that.
Number two.
Yeah.
Number two, BBC Question Time whilst I was over in Borneo, in Brunei, we can watch what you're all about. Surely this is a global platform now. And if it's a global platform, you should really think about being diplomatic about how you say things and what you're saying. Because Kim Jong-un can see it, Trump can see it, we can all see it, what's going on. And you two over here, like the guy on the left, I don't know your name, sorry, and I don't know your name, I know who you are, but like I don't know your name. You two are like tete-a-tete with each other. And we can see it, and you're trying to confuse the audience. And the audience aren't thick, we're Welsh.
All right. Well, I'm slightly confused by the argument, but thank you for the point. Now, we've only got a few minutes left. We'll go to a last question from Angela Siddle, please.
Hi. Is it fair that North Wales have substandard road and rail links, and that all we've got to look forward to are 30-year-old second-hand trains in the future?
Second-hand, 30-year-old trains, second-hand and substandard... right. Well, you feel very strongly, obviously, and it's something wherever we go in the country, we're hearing these complaints about our transport structure. Isabel Oakeshott.
Well, totally not. I mean, as a hard-pressed commuter who suffers daily on substandard train services, I completely sympathise. And I know that you were promised by the Conservatives services that you have not received. So that absolutely can't be right. And I was looking into this earlier and just wondering, for the sake of argument, how the Chinese do these things. And I noticed that they were able to build a whole new station in the space of 9 hours by flooding it with thousands of workers. We should be much more imaginative about getting infrastructure in quickly instead of condemning people to being isolated in remote areas.
Liam Wood.
No, it's not fair. It's not fair at all. The situation has always been bad. Our transport communication links weren't built for travelling within Wales. But over the last 10 years, since we've had austerity politics in play, it's got even worse. The UK national debt is now £1.7 trillion, and that's up £644 billion since George Osborne introduced austerity to reduce the UK's debt. So it's not even achieving what it was set out to achieve. And as a result, when investment decisions are taken, it's places like Wales and places regionally within Wales that suffer the most. We've lost out on electrification, the tidal lagoon. There were investment promises made to this country that have now been withdrawn. So it's absolutely not fair.
Didn't there used to be a railway line to Carnarvon?
There were railway lines all over the place in the 60s until the beach-in cuts came in. And if we could reintroduce some of those and reopen some of those lines, then that would make a big difference. We've also just agreed, heard the news this week, that the new rail franchise is coming in Wales. It's been awarded to a profit-making company, despite the fact that in Labour's manifesto they said they wanted to see it run as a not-for-profit rail company. Plaid Cymru believes that we should have a publicly owned rail company, and that money should be reinvested back into services, not profit for shareholders.
Dominic Grieve.
Isabel and I shared a taxi coming here, and the commentary I can tell you in the taxi was that the roads looked better than the area where we were living in England. So, I have to say to you, there is a
European money.
Well, I'm delighted to hear it, but I have to say to you, it was much better than in Buckinghamshire. But everybody in their own area complains. And the truth is, our road repairs have been very, very bad, and it's deteriorating. And yes, austerity has prevented expenditure on all sorts of things that we could need to spend money on. But equally, if we cannot borrow more money, so the only way we can do it is by taxing people more. And we've got to understand that. And we've also got to understand that there's a tipping point between raising taxes and people being disincentivised to generate wealth. It's a very difficult balance.
What about the Chinese solution, Isabel says, of having thousands of people... But was it 9 hours they built?
9 hours.
Sounds
Look
like
it
a
up.
television reality
There is a
show.
video here. You've got to watch
We can't get the
this
workers
thing.
out to take the fruit and veg off our farmers at the moment.
No.
Since Brexit, not enough rural workers.
The woman here on the left, what do you think?
I think we need to look at this from an environmental perspective as well. The incredibly high costs of rail transport in the UK are a disgrace, and it's having an environmental impact. It costs about £50 for a return train ticket from here to Cardiff, which would cost me about £20 in petrol. If we want to be sort of looking to the future and thinking about the impact that we're having environmentally, well, we need to be putting money into having cheaper trains and public transport.
All right. Matthew Wright?
Two things. I got caught in the timetable changes the day they were introduced on the Sunday, and I can't tell you how thrilled I was to hear that Mark Khan, the boss of Network Rail, was awarded an honour in the Queen's Birthday's honour. So truly a very well-deserved honour. Had I actually met him on the platform where we got chucked out waiting for a train that then didn't arrive, I might have given him a piece of my mind. I think that with transport infrastructure in this country, just as is actually now with the NHS, that the notion that we just allow governments to administer is wrong. We need cross-party support because governments look no further than a couple of years ahead of their nose, the next electoral cycle. They're only going to chuck out short-term measures. If you look at France, they had long-term 25-year plans. They have marvellous railways.
That's true about everything, the NHS as well.
I think the
NHS
NHS and transport are two prime contenders.
John Mann, we only have 60 seconds left.
Well, I came on a dirty, filthy, crowded Arriva train, having to transfer from a Virgin train managed by Network Rail. Simple. Nationalise the railways. One system, invest in the railways, invest in public transport. The woman in the green is right. It's an environmental improvement and a big one. It's also sensible economics. Major investment in rail, nationalised rail, take the profits out of it. And we might then have a train system. You're not getting what you deserve in infrastructure, not just in rail and transport. You in North Wales do not get your fair share, neither does my area. It's about time wealth in this country was rationally, reasonably, fairly spread across Wales, across England, across the United Kingdom, away from London and the South East, for everyone to get their fair share. You're not getting it, we're not getting it. Biggest fault line in this government. And I tell you what, if it fails to get its stuff through, what will happen is not there'll be further discussion on Brexit. We'll have a general election, we can get a decent government in, and we can properly move forward.
Okay. I was going to come to you, but John went on a bit longer than I thought, so I'm sorry I can't because our time's up. Apologies to all of you who had your hands up. I'm not blaming you. I'm just explaining it.